Bem-vindo.
Bienvenue.
Karibu.
Marhaba.
Welcome to Thriving Africa podcast, where we're all about trade and economy on the African continent.
We'll be discussing and analyzing intra-African trade, highlighting key projects, providing concrete tips, and experience sharing.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to Africa Thriving podcast. We're so excited to have you with us for this first episode. We are your hosts. My name is Chiraz Bensemmane, and I'm together with
Wincate Muthini. Glad to be here with you, Chiraz.
Me too. I am so excited for this, for the launch and for this first episode. And we decided that during this first episode, we're going to tell you a little bit more about ourselves, so you know who are your hosts, what we're all about, and most importantly, what this podcast is all about. So let's get started and let's dive in. So Wincate, could you introduce yourself a little bit to our audience, what you're all about, where you're from, and so that they just get to know you?
All right. So my name is Wincate Muthini. I currently am in Ethiopia, but I'm from Kenya. Been here for around 6 years. Multidisciplinary person who came from the field of engineering, but now working in trade facilitation. And it's been quite interesting, especially engaging with people from the different, African countries in the work that I do. So it's been, I'll say, quite an interesting journey of being a multifaceted person that I can represent different disciplines and discussions. But that is, I guess, where your introduction gets to, and it will be good to know more about you, Chiraz.
Well, I am currently in Marseille in France, but don't get too excited, people, because you never know where I'm going to be joining you from. I'm Algerian. And I'm a citizen of the world. I just love to do this. And contrary to Wincate, I actually had, I wouldn't say a boring life, not at all. But I decided from the get-go that I wanted to do a lot of international business. I actually have a master in international business and European affairs. And that's pretty much what I did. So I joined a company after my master. And every 4 to 7 months, we were doing country reports on pharmaceutical or oil and gas. So I got to work and live in 12 countries thanks to this company. So I did China, I did India, I did Brazil, South Africa, Canada. So I love, because that's what helped me and what pushed me to become an entrepreneur, which has been now 7 years in the making. I have 2 companies. One of them, we will talk about it a bit later. But yeah, I'm all passionate about, Africa, obviously, that's why we're here. But getting to learn more about the culture, about the business, international business, learning from everyone. And this is why I'm so excited with this podcast, because we are going to learn more about Africa. We're going to have all these amazing tips and project. And so it might be a bit selfish, no? It's maybe that's for me that I'm doing this podcast. But no. But Wincate, there's one thing actually you did not mention. So I mentioned I was an entrepreneur, but you said that you're working. Where are you working?
Yeah, so I'm working with the Pan-African Chamber of Commerce and Industry.
So before you tell us what PACCI is about, so the Pan-African Chamber, I would like to know, how did you get involved with PACCI initially?
Oh, it was actually by chance. This is the point where we talk about entrepreneurship, right? I remember when I first came to Ethiopia, I came in as a volunteer working for this NGO on youth leadership development. And on the side, I was doing graphic design as well as brand development, overall the whole branding shebang. And I wrote to someone saying hey, if you were looking for someone to assist you with branding and marketing, because that time the market in Ethiopia was fairly new when it came to branding and graphic design. And he introduced me to PACCI. So I initially came to PACCI to assist with the branding. And because I had a couple of background experiences with leadership management, program management, having different programs that I'd done with the UNECA as well as the AU, I got more and more involved with the programs. And before you know it, here I am now talking about trade facilitation.
So could you tell us a little bit more? Because I got to know PACCI this year. So we are in 2022, just in case somebody logged in this podcast and I don't know when. But I got to know the Pan-African Chamber of Commerce when you organized the Beyond Prosperity Conference in Botswana in May this year. And I didn't know about it before. I obviously know chambers of commerce. And when I was talking about PACCI with some partners, they were like, who is behind it? So to get behind all of this, could you tell us a little bit, what is PACCI? How does it work? What is the purpose? Anything that people need to know about PACCI?
So the Pan-African Chamber of Commerce and Industry was established as a result of what in 2012 at that stage was being called boosting intra-Africa trade in Africa. And in this case, chambers of commerce are always considered like the trade facilitators. They're the ones who are helping you move your goods from one country to another country and all the paperwork and correlation between the private sector as well as the public sector. So the chambers of commerce and industry came together and decided to found an apex body that would be representing the chambers of commerce as one voice. And we were established in 2009, currently based with the headquarters agreement with the government of Ethiopia. So currently based in Addis Ababa. So we represent the 54 national chambers of commerce and industry, but to expand our membership to also city associations, as well as multinational companies that are seeking to expand within different regions in Africa. So based on that conversation of boosting intra-African trade, we were like, okay, how do we actually play a role in that? And that's how we came in with the conference that we held. It's the biennium every 2 years. It's called Prosperity Africa. In this case, we wanted to discuss with small business exporters to understand what is the market for you? What are your challenges? What are the innovations already being done right now? We have so many different innovations by different institutions, including PACCI, but you find there's a disconnect between the communications that we have and what the private sector gets to be aware of. So that was a way to bridge that information. And it was, I'm even glad because now you see this is one of the outputs of how do we communicate this type of innovations and platforms that are coming up from trade facilitation bodies like PACCI, the UNECA, the AU, and likewise bodies.
No, for sure. And I think it's also, like you said, this this podcast is a little bit the fruit of this conference. So maybe we're just gonna explain how this podcast was born before I'll maybe explain what I do later on. But I so like Wincate was saying, you see like how in Africa, I'm Algerian, she's from Kenya, and we meet like people from all over Africa. And one thing that we realize is how there is sometimes a lack of information, or the information is accessible, but not everyone has access to it. So when we were talking with Wincate, because obviously when we met since then, we continued talking about what we're all about, what are the projects that are coming up, how we can also continue collaborating. And one of the things that I had actually discussed with somebody from the Africa CDC was like, why isn't there like a podcast about Africa and trade? And if you go on, and I invite anyone who's curious to actually check it out on like Spotify or anything, how many podcasts on that, there aren't actually so many about it. And because I am a small business, and I'll explain, don't worry, what I do later on. I like this, there's full transparency on this podcast. Like it just made sense to reach out to PACCI and see if that would be of interest for them to partner on this venture. And to see how we can like, I don't know, like work together, share the experience, share the information, and bring it together. So I didn't know obviously if that would be of interest, but it just clicked because it made sense for them, because obviously PACCI, like Wincate was sharing, is that they have all these chambers of commerce. They have also so much information that they share to their chambers and the private sector, but also that they get from them. So it just kind of made sense to do it together. And we also know whomever we are, whenever we start a project, sometimes you might know that you're not going to go through with it. You have the idea, but then it's about the implementation. And I think by doing it together, we're making sure that we're actually going to be implementing it. Wincate, would you like to add something about how this podcast came about, or anything I might have forgotten?
No, actually, you've covered it, and it's quite interesting because it even got sparked during the Prosperity Africa. If you listen to what the private sector was saying, the business is present, and that's what I really enjoyed about that conference. It was different. We had the main operators telling us what we need, and sometimes you tend to have these conversations happen where you're in a meeting and people are talking off the private sector, but not necessarily listening to them and what their challenges were. So we had also been thinking around, okay, how do we make all this information feasible and at the same time understandable? Because that was another thing that was being raised. Like the information on the documents are still not available in a manner that people could be able to easily digest it. So you could find that most of the information available was either considered too jargon in terms of their wording and not in a manner that someone could pick and start using that information right away. And we just had that conversation and ping pong when we were organizing. I was like, you know what, I like your personality and we have like all these ideas. Why don't we actually start doing it and use our experiences as well as a way to translate the information in a manner that anyone else within the continent can be able to understand. And considering our different languages as well, how do we make it also inclusive? Because that's another discussion that was brought about.
Yes. So, and we'll have a surprise, I think, at the end when we're going to explain to you what the podcast is about. We're going to explain to you the little format so that we try to make it as inclusive as possible.
Yes. So now we really need to know more about you, Chiraz. Like I have already said how I got into this field. You're talking about entrepreneurship and 2 businesses and all over the place. Like give us a little bit of a context of what's your journey been like to bring you to this point?
So I will focus only on one company that is the one that is partnering with PACCI, because the second one, although I love it, so I will mention it so that everyone knows, so they're not going to say, oh, she has another one. So I'll be like, so I created my first company, Pitchworld Fast, which is the one that I'm so happy and proud that we're partnering with the Pan-African Chamber of Commerce to bring you this podcast. And the how I came about creating this first company was really, so I mentioned I worked in 12 different countries. I got to interview chambers of commerce, government authorities, CEOs, and we were asking them when it came to the different countries, how the business was going, etc. And they were obviously offering me jobs because my job was also sales. I love sales. That's my thing. Not everyone does, but I love sales and international sales and stuff. But the more I was working on that, the more I could see myself less as an employee with them, but as a partner. And I was like, you know what? I am young. Let's give it a try. And the worst case scenario, I'm just going to collapse, but at least I don't have, it's going to be just me. It's going to be just me. There's no kids, nothing. And this is how I actually started my company and the venture. And the idea was really, and this is pretty much how I work on any of my projects, is really sharing of experience. So I wanted to share this experience and expertise that I had the opportunity of learning whatever I was traveling with all these C-level executives. And I was like, okay, most probably some people would benefit from it, especially if they want to export. So this is how my first project was with an Algerian company. So I went back to Algeria, did like a training with an Algerian company to help their team. And besides the private sector, I actually, because I had worked with the Ministry of Health of Algeria before with my job, they actually reached out back to me and asked me if I could help them improve the healthcare system in Algeria through roundtables and discussion, because that's pretty much how it is. So in 2016, we launched the first roundtables for Algeria, and we've done them till COVID hit, obviously. Hi, COVID. Thank you for sharing your experience with us. And then we had to pivot the business because I'm a private company, right? You don't have that support, and I needed pretty much to think it. So 2020 was, to some extent, I was like, saying, and I'm not the only one, and I'm sure a lot of entrepreneurs will recognize themselves in that, it was as if I was starting my company from scratch again. And but because I still had this idea, and my way of thinking is sharing of experience, one thing that came out of COVID for me was how Africa was really dismantled in their way of approaching COVID and not really talking to each other and talking in one voice. So that's how the Africa webinar were born. And nowadays, so through that, this is how I digged even deeper into my knowledge of what Africa was doing in the healthcare system and trade and economy. And obviously, the more I prepare my webinars, the more I learn about it, the more I learn, obviously, with it. So now with webinars, so every month we meet with the African authorities and stakeholders. We talk about each of them, share their experience. So like you were saying, Wincate, like really sharing what everyone should know, but nobody knows to some extent, and really getting into it and digesting the information. So we do sharing of experience. Each of the countries tell us what they're all about, depending on the topic. Then we discuss to have some action plans. And so those are our key project, I would say. So we have the Africa webinars. So we work a lot on like sharing experience, capacity building, and obviously anything that is related to consulting. I did mention I have a second company, so I'll just put it in brackets. So I do have a second one that is called Coach Tribe, which is a platform for online coaching. So we have coaches from all around the world. And the idea was same thing for me, is sharing experience, building capacity, and having really like community building. So yeah, that's pretty much what what I do, what I do, and this is also how we got with PACCI, and how I think we have this importance or this idea that we have information, we need to make it accessible, because by having all this information, we can really get into action and improve and grow. So now, the meat of this episode, although I'm sure everyone loved to know more about us, what is this podcast going to be about? Tell us, Wincate, what are we going to talk about? What is the format?
I believe it would be, we're looking at it from the lens of the private sector, anyone who's trying to do business or is doing business within Africa, trying to get to venture into new markets, understanding overall what is the economy per country and the continent itself, and what are the initiatives being brought forth to facilitate that on the side of finance, investments. We're talking about policies, things like, for example, data protection, like what is the current status of different countries or what are they doing with that? And I think you can also add into like what else they should be expecting.
For sure. Well, you can expect interviews, and we love doing interviews. I love doing those. So we're gonna have people. It's not gonna be just Wincate and me all the time. We're gonna have people coming in. As we mentioned, there are quite a lot of reports that are published. So maybe we'll do some discussion about it and around it, so that we see it. And even if Wincate said we see it from the private lens, so that it's more like giving concrete tips potentially, or concrete information, the government will be involved. All the stakeholders will be involved, because at the end of the day, it's information about trade and economy in Africa. So it's not, as on the contrary, like we were saying from the beginning, is making sure that all the stakeholders, all the people that have a role to play are involved, get the information, get their opinion. And like this, we keep the discussion coming. And Wincate, tell us how are we going to make it inclusive?
How are we going to make it inclusive? Well, we're going to do all the recognized languages right now with the AU. Because I know if we say all African languages, we'll be calling a tall order of thousands. So we're going to be having it in English, in Swahili, in French, Arabic, and it is Portuguese or Spanish.
It's going to be both. It's going to be both, because we have Portuguese and African Union have Spanish. So we're just going to add Spanish. That's it.
As much as we can, we disseminate the information in that language. So even having like a debrief from every podcast that you listen to will give you like a quick debrief in those various languages. And later on, like even adding in the transcripts for those who will be able to enable them to read into it. And it's actually quite exciting at the thought of having like, and quite a lot of work on us to make sure.
Oh my God, yes. So you're going to hear our voices. So here's the thing. We talked about it with Wincate, because we were like, we have to make it inclusive, right? We know that it's in English. So even if this episode is in English, bear in mind that there's going to be like a shorter one coming next. There are going to be in French, in Portuguese, in Swahili, in Arabic, in Spanish, where we're going to summarize pretty much the content, so that if you do not speak if you do not speak the language, then you will still have access to the information. And we're going to make sure, obviously, that everything we're saying concrete. But also the other thing we were saying is that the people that we're going to have, maybe some of them, when we're going to interview them, they might be French speakers or Arabic speaker or like Spanish or Portuguese, whatever. So we might do these interviews or these episodes in their languages, so that they feel more at ease. But as always, we will have those summaries and we will have the transcript, so that you can also read it. But yeah, it's going to be a lot of work, as Wincate had said, but it's so exciting. It's like, yes.
I'm just like thinking about brushing up my Swahili.
Oh, don't worry. I'm the same.
It's
way that I need
very interesting. Kenyan Swahili versus Tanzanian, and I'm sure that usually the main conversations. I have to really clean out my shang and come with that Swahili sanifu, as we say. And I think it's going to be quite interesting, like for both of us, bringing like the interest in terms of language, because at the end of the day, trying to break that barrier as well. Like one of the things that they also alluded to in that conference was language is also a sense of barrier, because from a language you can get to understand how people operate and their values and their thinking around it. So it'd be interesting to see from the different speakers, as Chiraz has mentioned. They're introducing a little bit of a background and context of ways of doing business within that country, basic phrases you need to know when you're starting out with the greetings.
Maybe it's going to help people, also pushing them to learn some other languages. It's okay. This is actually very funny, guys, because between Wincate and I, we actually speak all the African language, the official African Union language. Not all of them. No, I don't speak 1,000 languages. No. But we do, and we understand them. So we're actually just, again, made just fully sense. But same thing for me. I never actually done interviews in Arabic. So we'll have to brush up on that because it's not the same thing as like speaking with your parents or like going out in and about. But we want to make sure that everyone get access to it. And again, even if it has to be just snippets, so you get the most important meat. I want to also suggest something that I didn't talk to Wincate about, but like surprise in this episode. But I was just like thinking that whenever you're listening to the podcast, there's going to be obviously our email for the podcast. But if you have topics you want us to touch upon, or people you want us to interview, or even yourself you want to be interviewed, depending, you can always like send it to us, and then we can analyze according to the calendar of the content we've already done, how we can make sure to include that. Because at the end of the day, this podcast, even if initially in a joke way, it is for us, it's actually not for us, it is really for the continent and for everyone who's interested in Africa to know more and to learn more. So I think it's also good in a way if we can do it a little bit interactive. So don't hesitate. I want to say that we're open to suggestions, right?
Yes, very open to it. And actually I like the suggestion, because at the end of the day, they tell us. I really like the idea of having the input coming in from our listeners, and that would also broaden our scope of understanding what is the situation on the ground. We cannot know all at all, but all of us collectively can know all at all.
Exactly.
That is actually sense, but you know what I meant to say.
It does. And just a last thing. So this podcast will be published every Monday at 11 a.m. GMT. So that would be 12 p.m. Algeria, Tunisia, South Africa, 1 p.m. Ethiopia, Kenya, and 2 p.m. Madagascar. I think that's what we're good. That should be, I'm giving those countries, guys, but just it's 11 a.m. GMT. So every Monday, every week, you'll hear us talking, this time not just the two of us, but on a specific topic and not just about us. And well, I think that's it for our intro. Obviously, if you have more questions and we haven't answered anything, so that you know who we are and what we do, obviously go for it. But and even actually under this episode, if you want to tell us more or like you already have ideas, please go ahead, and we will be putting anyway the email of the podcast so that you'll know where to send us any information. Any final words, Wincate?
Well, I'm excited about the whole journey to learn more. I feel that I also contribute quite a bit from conversations and back and forth of listening, as well as getting to know what is the actual situation on ground in Africa, and more or less, where are we heading to? Because I believe we have such an exciting timeline right now with the Africa Continental Free Trade Area. So it'll be exciting to go through this with you, Chiraz, and with our guests who will be joining us and all our audience.
I know, I'm very, very excited. It's going to be so exciting. And we'll see you next week. That's all. Perfect. See you guys.